If you are new to the world of playing Monster Hunter, you might be feeling incredibly overwhelmed by how much there is to learn in this game. Don't worry though, I got you. I've spent a lot of time putting this together. It's my ultimate beginner's guide to Monster Hunter Wilds. There are several chapters in this video, all of them timestamped, so you can either watch the whole thing through or you can skip around depending on what topic you want to learn more about. And with that out of the way, here we go. Probably the biggest question most new players try to figure out an answer to right away is what weapon they should main. I've actually already made a separate video on this exact topic, which I'll link down in the pinned comment. But if you don't want to jump back and forth between two videos, here's a short one-sentence description of what each weapon in the game brings to the table. Sword and Shield, a beginner-friendly weapon that allows you to be versatile and does most things well. Great Sword, big hulking sword with slower swing time but big damage. Dual Blades, low damage per hit but hyper fast attack speed and good movement. Hunting Horn, support style weapon where you can hit the monster but also play songs in combat that buff your allies in different ways. Hammer, slow attack speed but big hits that excel at stunning the monster and knocking it on its butt. Charge Blade, a challenging contraption which is actually two weapons in one where you first build up charges then release them for big burst damage. Switch Axe, another two weapon in one type deal where you can swap back and forth between sword form and axe form on the fly with high ceiling potential but again very tricky to learn. Insect Glaive, acrobatic aerial combat where you not only use a glaive but have a fun little kinsect buddy helping you out. Light Bowgun, ranged weapon with various ammo types that allows you to be relatively light on your feet. Heavy Bowgun, ranged weapon with various ammo types that's a little bit tougher to lug around but more on the harder hitting side. Gun Lance, close range weapon that specializes in blasting monsters with explosive gun shells. Lance, close range melee weapon that specializes in turning you into an unmoving wall of defense. Longsword, elegant, long-reaching weapon where you slowly build up a gauge to max and then dish out powerful attacks, rinse and repeat. And finally, the Bow, ranged weapon that encourages a more mobile run-and-gun playstyle. Remember that unlike other games in the franchise, Monster Hunter Wilds allows you to carry two weapons into combat at the same time. By entering your tent at your base camp, then tabbing over to the Equipment menu tab and then hitting Change Equipment, you can choose which weapons you want to bring into combat. This might sound weird, but when you eventually reach endgame level content, taking two of the same weapon might not be as silly as you think. The reason being there is you can craft very different versions of the same weapon, and each might excel at doing something different. For example, I could bring one hammer that excels at just dealing raw damage, and then I could bring a second different hammer that does less damage but is better for stunning the monster. For beginner players though, I recommend taking two different weapons into combat, maybe one ranged weapon and one melee weapon, and trying out both to see which you enjoy more. While in combat, you can change your weapon by hitting right on the D-pad, which will then have your sacred pick you up, and then you'll change weapons while on your sacred. If you'd like to practice and feel out each weapon for yourself before bringing them into combat, head to the very back area of your first base camp and enter the training area. There you can access a nearby chest that will allow you to change weapons and try out combos on a nearby barrel structure. Each weapon has their own different combat flow. You may not be able to see all of your attacks available listed on screen at first, but as you start using attacks, you'll see your next available combo options show up in the top right corner. I hard recommend practicing with a new weapon a little bit at first to try and explore different combo options before heading out into the field. Armor-wise, you can talk to everyone's favorite character, Gemma, who can help you craft a wide variety of armor. As you can imagine, each armor set you eventually unlock will provide different types of resistances and other skills that can help you in different ways. For players just starting out, you might want to focus on upping your overall defense number. As you progress and fight tougher and tougher monsters though, you may want to think about crafting armor pieces that give you certain resistances. For example, I got my ass whipped in a fight by a critter who was burning me a lot and realized after that my fire resistance was extremely low. I crafted some stronger fire resist armor and then went back and took my revenge. Later on though, as you reach the end game, you might want to refocus your armor crafting to creating entire sets, which can give you unique set bonuses. These typically provide you with more bang for your buck overall, as the set bonuses can be quite strong. Let's talk real quick about what you should do before heading out of base camp and into the wild, even if you're just going out to explore, but especially if you're going out to go on a quest or on a hunt. This may sound weird, but cooking and eating meals is a vitally important thing to do in Monster Hunter that new players need to learn about right away. By going into your tent at base camp, then tabbing over to the barbecue menu, then hitting grill a meal, you have the option to make food for yourself. You can make a recommended meal if you're a complete newcomer, but I recommend effing around with making custom meals because it's not really that hard. Each ingredient you select will yield a different result. For example, picking meat gives you more health and stamina as well as an attack bonus, while choosing fish will give you more health and stamina as well as a defense bonus. You can start cooking right then and there, or you can add additional ingredients which can give you even more effects as well as extend the overall duration of how long these buffs will apply to you after you've finished eating. Adding in a finishing touch will also give additional buffs if you have any that you'd like to add in. Cook your meal for a fun little animation, and then you get all of those buffs for anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes depending on what meal you cooked. And again, these buffs aren't minor. More health, more stamina, more attack, etc. are major improvements, and if you go out into the field without eating first and get into a tough fight, you're really going to be wishing you chowed down before heading outside. So, because cooking ingredients are so important while you're out in the wild roaming around, be sure to keep an eye out for things you can gather and bring back home to cook with later. Rations, aka the base component of every meal, are very easy to come by. Meat can be acquired by killing and then carving smaller animals out in the wild. You can also acquire fish by, fishing. Rations can also be acquired from the supply pouch at the beginning of a hunt, which you can hit left on the D-pad to access. It's basically an extra supply pouch on your sacred, and don't forget to periodically check in with Tom the Palico at the Ingredient Center, who can also hook you up with free rations. Acquiring extra ingredients is slightly trickier. They are usually given out as quest rewards through the various regions that you travel to when playing the game. You can also acquire ingredients through trading, something you'll eventually unlock when playing the game, and is done through Nada. You can trade with villagers from across the world and get extra ingredients in exchange for various items that you might find while out in the wild. Eastern honey and wild herbs can be acquired while you're acquiring honey and herbs out in the wild, but remember that the chance of them dropping for you goes up a lot during the plenty. If you don't know what I mean by that, remember that in wilds there are kind of different rotating environment types. Plenty, aka bright, sunny, and plentiful. Fallow, aka cloudy, dusty, and kinda dreary. And inclemency, aka dark and stormy. Therefore, if you want to farm finishing touches, it's best to do so during a time of plenty. You can actually change the environment type yourself if you want to. From your tent right in the cooking menu, actually, you eventually unlock an option to rest. Hitting the rest option will allow you to sleep until it's plenty time, or whatever time you want, although doing so will require spending guild points, something you'll earn when playing the game. If you find yourself out in the wild and either your meal timer runs out or you just realize, hey, I forgot to eat a meal, you can always whip out your portable grill and do it that way. The portable grill also features a grill meat option where you basically play a mini game and stop cooking a slab of meat when you feel it's finished. This can result in you burning the meat if you leave it on for too long, but if you take it off at just the right time, you will get well done steak. Well done steak is an item you can eat in combat, which both restores health and stamina. It will also boost your max gauges, which, if you don't know what that means, there might be times in combat where a status condition has kind of lowered your max stamina or health cap. Eating a well done steak can boost those max gauges again. In short though, cooking and eating is hugely important in Wild, so do not ignore it as a new player. Let's talk about items real quick, and Lord, there are a ton of them in Monster Hunter. I'm not going to go through each individual item in the game because that would be a multi-hour video. I'll instead go over a list of the most important beginner-friendly items that you should always be stocking up on before heading out into the wild. Side note though, as you go through the game, I highly recommend that you acquire as many items as you can, reading the descriptions and learning about each as much as possible. Doing that will help you better understand what items can be used for as you play. But yeah, here we go. Key items for beginner players. Potions and mega potions. Early on, this is your bread and butter. Both of these can be used in combat to quickly restore health, and when you're just starting out, you're going to be using them a lot. Max potions, the top shelf healing option, fully restores your health and temporarily maximizes the size of your health gauge. When you finally unlock them, try to have a few on hand and be sure to use them when you're really getting ragdolled out in the field. Dust of Life or Life Powder. Dust of Life is the stronger version version of life powder, but another handy healing item to have in the field, especially if you're hunting with friends. Whereas something like a potion will only heal you, life powder or dust of life is more of an AoE healing type deal and can heal both you and teammates if they are close to you. Well done steak, something we just went over, restores health and stamina and boosts both to their max gauges in combat. Antidote or herbal medicine. Antidote on its own will cure poison, while herbal medicine will cure poison and restore a slight amount of your health. Fighting monsters that can poison you really sucks, as your health will deplete repeatedly until the poison effect wears off, so having items to counteract poison is really important. Nullberry. Nullberries can help you in a fight if you've been afflicted by any elemental blights or ailments which are annoying to deal with. Also, it can restore your elemental resistance to normal, which is nice. Dung pod and large dung pod. These are handy for beginner players if you're in a situation where there are multiple creatures in one area and they're all ganging up on you, and you want to separate them so you can just focus on one monster in particular. Hit them with a large dung pod to scatter the herd. Flash pod. Flash pods are incredibly useful in Monster Hunter. Firing one at a monster in a fight will blind them, but what I use them for 99% of the time is to immediately cripple any monster that can fly. Shooting a flash pod at an airborne creature will send it crashing to the ground in a daze, allowing you to immediately start wailing on it. And finally, pitfall traps, shock traps, and trank bombs. While you won't get access to these immediately, you eventually will as you go through the story. Crafting these items, once you're able to, will make fights go so much smoother at the end for you and your party. Shock and pitfall traps can be put on the ground, and then when a monster steps on them, they'll be temporarily incapacitated. This can allow you and your team to freely beat up on the creature until it recovers, or if the monster is very weak, i.e. limping away or trying to take a nap, if it gets stuck in a trap, then you can slam them with trank bombs on the ground right on top of them repeatedly to capture the monster instead of killing it. Doing so can not only help you end fights a little bit faster, but can also yield more materials from the monster, which is awesome. Also, big tip, as you start to really take note of what items you use the most while out in the field, be sure to map them to your radial menu, which you can customize by hitting pause or whatever, then going down to customize radial menu. On controller, you access your radial menu by holding L1 and then the D-pad in any direction, depending on which of your available radial menus you're trying to look at. This might seem confusing at first, but the radial menu is clutch. It's basically a great way to access your biggest go-to items in a much faster manner than manually scrolling through them the way you normally would. This kind of goes hand in hand with important new player items because most vital items in Monster Hunter need to be crafted, i.e. you won't find a max potion just laying around on the floor, you gotta go make one. In order to craft, either enter your tent at base camp, or if you're out in the field, you can hit pause, then hitting crafting list from the menu. Doing so will show you everything that your hunter is able to craft and also what ingredients you'll need in order to craft each item. When crafting, you might notice that certain items may have several question marks next to them, aka you don't know what crafting it will create. But even though you don't know what it'll turn into, as long as you have the required materials for whatever it is, you can still craft the item, which will then permanently reveal the name and icon in your crafting list. Try to do this whenever you can to fully flesh out your crafting list. When crafting, take a mental note of what important items you'll likely need to farm or collect on the regular in order to craft your most used items. For example, to make potions and mega potions, you'll need both herbs and honey, so if you're crafting potions a lot, which you probably will be as a new player, be on the lookout to collect any herbs and honey that you find in the field. Antidote herbs are vital for crafting antidote and herbal medicine. Flash bugs will help you craft flash pods, dung will let you craft dung pods, sleep herbs and parashrooms can help you craft trank bombs, and so on and so forth. Whatever your most crafted items are, take note of how they're made and keep your eyes peeled to grab the raw components out in the wild as often as you can. If you're hunting specific items in the wild, just whip out your map and look for the corresponding icon. You can also set a waypoint on whatever item you're looking for and then just head right over to it to collect it. Remember that using your capture net in the wild on small animals or bugs can give you different things. For example, the Great Thunderbug clouds will give you a finished free shock trap if captured with the capture net. If you grab them using your slinger, however, it will just prompt them to electrify the next monster to pass through them. Also worth mentioning that if you're wearing gear with the Botanist Equipment skill, which should be on your default leather your armor set. You'll be able to harvest extra consumable herbs when gathering, so you might want to throw on some botanist gear if you're heading out to farm components. And on that note, as you just saw with the botanist armor, your gear in Monster Hunter Wilds can come with unique equipment skills, which can customize your gameplay experience a little bit more. When forging new armor and new weapons, or when upgrading current weapons, you should always take note of the stats your new gear will give you, but also be sure you're paying attention to the equipment skills. We don't have to go through each one because there are many, but it's absolutely something you want to be aware of as a new player, as you may start to find unique equipment skills that you really like using. You should be aware of how equipment skills change at higher levels too. Even though you won't get access to those higher level skills right away, you can make a mental note of what they do, so you can maybe start to think about what kind of builds you want to use when you eventually reach the end game. On the subject of equipment, you can also forge new equipment for your Palico, aka your little feline companion. And yes, there is more to Palico equipment than just fashion-related purposes, although if you want to just dress up your kitty to make them look great, there's definitely a lot of merit to that. And while your Palico can't flat out die in combat, they can grab the monster's attention or help you in other ways. They also can get knocked on their ass faster if their gear is bad. Therefore, upgrading your Palico's gear to be stronger and better is actually fairly important, because again, while they can't die, they can stay up and in the fight longer, and by extension, help you more frequently as opposed to laying face down in a ditch. Talismans are items that you'll unlock when playing the main story, I believe around Chapter 2. Talismans are a vital part of your overall loadout. They can give you additional equipment skills, which we've already talked about, as well as other stat bonuses. It can be kind of easy to forget about charms because they're not often as immediately noticeable on your armor, which can be very wild and bright and out there. But yeah, be sure to remember them and craft new ones depending on what kind of build you're going for and what kind of equipment perks you enjoy using. Like talismans, decorations are items that can further customize your combat experience. Instead of wearing them, though, decorations are inserted directly into your weapon or armor to enhance how they perform. Take note that not every item in the game will have available slots for decorations, but the deeper you get into the game, you'll get access to more gear that can take advantage of decorations. When talking to Gemma, the blacksmith, hit change equipment, then hover over a weapon or piece of armor and hit the option to edit decorations. Then you can click on an empty decoration slot and insert any jewel you want to grant your gear more effects. For example, I really like it when my hammer exhausts a monster, so I'm going to go ahead and slap a drain jewel into my most used hammer to up the exhaust factor. Also, do not feel hesitant about experimenting with jewels. You can remove and reapply them as much as you want. They are not use one time and they're gone forever type deals, so start experimenting and having fun customizing your gear. Before jumping into combat, just a quick note and reminder that you can actually make loadouts in-game. In your tent, tab over to change equipment and then press L3 for manage loadouts. Make sure you have on everything equipped that you want to have equipped, and then you can save your loadout. Using that feature, you can have different loadouts on deck that you can swap to at any time. You can make loadouts that are centered around a particular weapon or armor set you enjoy, and then maybe make a different loadout for harvesting items out in the wild that feature the botanist equipment skill that we went over earlier. Reminder that you can also make loadouts for your items too, aka a certain assortment of items that you'd prefer to take out into the wild. TLDR, loadouts are a thing, try and make them as frequently as you can. Your basic combat loop is really going to depend on what weapon you're using, but no matter what weapon you've entered combat with, certain aspects of the fight are always going to be the same, so let's talk combat. Unless you're a complete god, one thing you'll always have to think about in combat is healing, where and when to do it. You can activate potions or other healing related items whenever you want, and unless you're using the sword and shield, you'll have to sheathe your items when doing so. You can also use healing items when riding your sacred, and you can call for your sacred mount almost any time during a fight. Therefore, if you're in a situation where you've really gotten your ass kicked and you're rolling around on the ground trying to recover, you can call for your sacred as you're tumbling, have them come in and rescue you, and then you can use a healing item as you put distance between you and the monster. If you're using a melee weapon in combat and having a hard time landing hits, remember to use your focus mode, which you can do by hitting and holding L2. This allows you to aim your strikes a little bit better and is something they added to Wilds that I really enjoy. When using focus mode, you may notice these little red glowing injuries that can appear on a monster's body the more you damage it. Every weapon in the game has a method of wound breaking, which is usually done by hitting R1 or right bumper, which leads into kind of a wound breaking combo. You should remember to do this when you can, because breaking wounds on a monster leads to big damage and also flat out stunning them sometimes. Using the environment is also something that can very much come in handy when fighting a monster. Try to keep your eyes peeled for environmental hazards you can activate, usually which you'll find by looking up. Vine traps from a nearby tree, or just using your slinger to pull down a pile of rocks right onto a monster's head is a great way to get some free burst damage on a monster as well as knocking it on its butt. If you're fighting with a melee weapon, you should be sure to keep your eye on this meter in particular during the fight, which is your sharpness meter. If this meter really starts to deplete, that means your weapon is getting dull and therefore is going to be less effective and deal less damage. When you get a free moment during the fight, be sure to take out your whetstone and take a second to sharpen your blade, and do so from a safe location, obviously. Remember, you can also sharpen your weapon when riding your sacred, which is usually a good idea because you're less likely to get hit when sharpening. Mounting is something that's both extremely fun to do and massively helpful in a fight. By leaping on top of a monster and hitting the attack button, you have a chance to mount the creature. You can do this really easily by just having your sacred run at the monster head on, and then you jump, dismount in the direction of the monster, and then swing your weapon when you get close. If you succeed and land the mount, here's an easy play-by-play for what I usually like to do. First, I'll move up the creature's body to the head, and then I'll repeatedly stab it with light strikes. If the creature tries to buck you off, you can take a break from stabbing to kind of brace for impact to prevent getting thrown off, then return to stabbing. When you've created a wound on the monster's head or neck, which will glow bright red, you can start hitting R1, and then you'll go into a wound-breaking attack, which will deal big damage and send the monster to the ground in pain. Random combat tip: if you're in a fight and see that your health bar is beginning to flash red wildly and you haven't been hit by the monster yet, that means you're about to get hit by a big attack and you need to GTFO right away. It's the game's way of telling you that you're essentially in the danger zone of an impending attack, and that's kind of the entire vibe of combat in Monster Hunter in general. Each monster moves and attacks in a different way. The more you fight a specific species of monster, the more you'll learn their movements and attack patterns, and the better you'll get at dodging them or countering their incoming attacks. This is something that will all be learned with patience, time, and repetition. Remember that monsters don't have health bars, but you'll still be able to figure out how close a monster is to death through a few different methods. If a monster is limping or moving very slowly, it is likely extremely injured and close to going down. Also, if you look at your minimap and see a skull icon following said monster repeatedly, that is another good sign it's about to go down soon. Final thing now to mention for combat is that when fighting, you may wind up literally chopping off a piece of the monster's body when they're still alive. Kinda morbid, but this is kinda awesome, and you should always remember to collect body parts as they come off, as they are vital components to crafting certain pieces of gear. Think of it as bonus loot, and the better you get at combat, you may be able to deliberately target certain body parts if you're looking to acquire certain monster pieces to craft certain gear. If you're trying to improve your overall strategy when hunting a particular monster, i.e. you want to be more efficient at killing it, do a little homework first. Open your main menu to Info, then go to Monster Field Guide and hit Large Monster Field Guide. Here, you can learn about a monster's breakable parts and their weak points, as well as recommended elements, status effects, and items that will work well against that monster in combat. If you are watching today's guide as a relatively new player and you have additional tips or questions from your fellow beginners, please share them down in the comment section. And of course, please give the video a like if you feel it helped you out in some way. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.